Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Glory bolt action video. In today's episode, we shall be asking and answering one simple question. Which Soviet starter army is the best? Now that might seem like a pretty basic premise, but you see, the Soviets are a pretty venerable faction in the game of bolt action. They've been around since the beginning and they have some very tried and tested kits. But that also means that they've got a number of different ways you can get into the army. And Warlord Games recently released a new Soviet starter army in addition to the old ones that they had. And it can be kind of tricky for new players to know which one to go for. What are the major differences? It can be a little confusing to know where to start. But never fear, Mordian Glory is here. I'm going to take you through step by step each of the 3 Soviet starter armies, and at the end of the video I'm going to give you my recommendation for which one I think is the best. And with all of that said, let us fix bayonets, advance forwards, not one step backwards, comrades, and dive right into today's episode. Let's begin with what very well may be the most popular and common starter set for this faction, which is the Soviet Winter Army. Every game store that I've ever been in, if they stock bolt action, they've got one of these bad boys on the shelves. And it's easy to understand why. This kit basically sells itself. Anyone who's made the decision that they're going to get into the Soviets has probably watched films like Enemy at the Gates, and that image of a conscript charging forward clad in a frozen trench coat with nothing but a Mosin Nagant gripped in his fists is something that a lot of people want to recreate. But it might be a very popular set, but is it the best one? Well, let's take a look at the contents. There are a number of metal models in this set. You have the Soviet HQ, which is 4 metal figures, 2 officers, 1 radio operator, and 1 medic. You also have the Soviet Maxim MMG team, and you have a Soviet medium mortar team as well. As for the plastic models, you get a KV tank, which can be built as a KV1 and a KV2. You get enough parts where you can just swap the turrets out. And you get what is probably the biggest selling point of this kit, 80 Soviet plastic infantry. That is truly an obscene amount of bodies. The average amount of infantry in a bolt action army across all factions is about 30 to 40. You get double that. It means you'll be able to build all of the anti-tank rifle teams, all the LMGs, SMGs, snipers, officers, and also riflemen that you're ever going to need in a normal, balanced Soviet force. And if you do want to go down the whole one man with the rifle, one man follows him sort of army style, you absolutely can do that. Now on paper, this seems really impressive. You're getting officers, support teams, a big tank, and you're getting a shed load of infantry. But very much like the Soviet Union in real life, there was a lot of quantity, but not all of these units are great. For example, MMG teams are an alright unit, but they are often included to pad out a starter army, and you don't really need one in this force. You've got more than enough infantry to get up to a 1,000-point army that, more often than not, whilst you might get an MMG team in this army, you're unlikely to use it. Likewise, with the Soviet HQ, the 4 metal figures, it's nice to have the unique sculpts, but you have 80 Soviet infantry. You have all the infantry you're going to need. 4 extra metal ones really just adds a bit of extra flavour more than anything else. The medium mortar team is fantastic, and the infantry is fantastic. The KV, mid-tier. It's a decent tank, but For a lot of people, it's a bit of an expensive tank to include in the set. And I'm not talking money-wise, I'm talking in-game points-wise. The normal KV-1 is about 350 points. In a standard 1,000 point game about action, that is a huge proportion of your army list. You could go for the KV-2, but that one's got all sorts of crazy rules, and whilst it is very, very powerful, fundamentally it's a bit of a meme unit. So when you get rid of all of the meh to sort of not needed stuff, realistically the best bits of this are the infantry and the mortar team, and everything else is kind of okay. Put it this way, on paper this army has everything you need and is totally self-contained, and if you buy this you won't want anything else. But everyone I know who bought this, including myself, ended up going and getting some additional kits, the most common one being a T-34. In summary, it is a starter army that has a lot of stuff in it, but it feels like there's a decent amount of filler there as well. And considering that this is one of the more expensive starter sets from Warlord Games, coming in at £116, sure, you're getting a lot of stuff, but you are paying for that. It is a premium starter set. Overall, I give the Winter Soviet Army a solid 7.5 out of 10. Aesthetically, it is exactly what most people are looking for. And it does come with a lot of units. However, you are paying for those models, and more than likely, you're going to pick up a few other kits to make this army just a little bit more efficient. But how does this score look in the wider picture? Well, let's take a look at our next contender, the Soviet Army from 1940 to 1943. This is the latest starter set for this faction, and it contains 64 plastic infantry, 1 plastic T-34-76 medium tank, and then you have a bunch of metal models. You get 1 officer, 1 commissar, 1 medic, 1 medium machine gun, and 1 45mm anti-tank gun. On the surface, this looks like a really good starter set. You get lots of plastic infantry, you get the T-34, which is a lot more flexible than the KV, and you get your officers and support teams, right? Well, unfortunately, I think this is now the worst Soviet starter set. It's not a bad kit by any means, but in comparison to the winter one, it's just not as good. Firstly, it used to come in at about £89. That was from Warlord Games. If you get it from a third-party retailer, you could get it for even cheaper than that. Now, after Warlord Games' recent standardization and consolidation, a lot of their starter army prices, it has come in at $116, putting it at the same cost as the Winter Army. But you don't get as many infantry. You get a better tank, sure, but you don't get as many metal officers. You only get 3 in this one. You don't get 4 like you do in the full Soviet command. And you get the medium machine gun, which is whatever, in both sets, but you don't get the medium mortar in the 1940 to 1943 army. Instead, you get the anti-tank gun. But honestly, the 45mm anti-tank gun is a bit like the machine gun. If it's in a starter set, it's often considered to be a bit of a filler, because it's just like I think it's a light or a medium AT gun. Either way, most people don't put a lot of stock into AT guns unless it's something like the ZIS or the 25 pounder, which can be used as both howitzers and anti-tank guns, but this one can't be. So out of all of the stuff that you get in this set, the infantry and the tank are the best bit, but you don't get enough infantry to do the full-blown Soviet Red Tide as you do in the Winter Army, and everything else is basically filler. For me, for this one to be worth it again, it would have to go down to the mid-tier price. If it was to be standardized at a price point, I think it should be at the mid-level, which is the £98 starter sets. Then it's all right. because the extra money you'd have to put in to get that medium mortar stuff wouldn't be so much of a problem. But as it stands right now, outside of the T34, there isn't really a lot of reasons to go for this starter set over the others. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's a good start, but not the best Soviet start. And finally, we get to the good old fashioned, the El Clasico, the Soviet starter army. Not winter, not 1940 to whatever, just straight down the middle, as basic as you can get, the Soviet starter army. This starter set contains 64 plastic Soviet infantry, a plastic T-34-85 medium tank, which is the better variant because it's got the heavy AT gun. It also has a medium mortar team and a metal officer and a medic. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think bang for buck, right now, this is the best Soviet army. It's all killer, no filler. That tank is a really good one. T-34-85 is a vehicle that you can take into almost any engagement and be comfortable that it will get the job done. It's not too expensive, it's not dirt cheap, it's right down the middle. It's well armored, being a medium tank, but you're not paying ridiculous points for things like heavy armor like you are on the KV, but it does have a heavy anti-tank gun, allowing it to match or even exceed a lot of German armor you're going to come across. It matches the Panzer IV, for example, but it exceeds the Panzer III with that medium AT gun. As for the plastic infantry, sure, you're not going to get enough to do the full-blown Soviet Red Tide, but 64 is more than enough for a run-of-the-mill, normal bolt-action army. Like I said earlier, most people bring between 30 and 40 infantry. We've got 64. This means you'll be able to build all the normal squads that you want and have enough left over to build your free rifle squad and have enough bodies to still be able to put a bit of unit variety in there with some spare LMGs and SMGs, or you can go for things like your anti-tank rifles. 64 infantry is totally fine if the majority of the infantry you're going to actually pay points for on your list are going to be regular and you have that one conscript squad. The two metal infantry, the officer and the medic, is realistically all you need. You don't really care about having two officers because you're probably not going to run two officers in your normal bolt action games. You're just going to take that mandatory lieutenant, and the medic can just be the dude running around bodyguarding him. And finally, you have that medium mortar. And being brutally honest, of all the various support teams that Warlord puts in their starter sets, like medium machine guns and anti-tank guns and so on and so forth, realistically, the only one that anyone cares about is the medium mortar. It's an auto-include in every list, and so it's kind of mandatory for it to be in every starter army, and it's this that puts the Soviet starter army above the 1940 to 1943 one. Well, that and the price point. Because on paper this is a smaller starter set, you don't get the full metal command and you don't get the extra MMG support team. It's only £98. This makes it the cheapest Soviet starter set. The only tiny fly in the ointment and consideration you might want to take into account when you're picking this starter army is that the Soviet infantry have the summer uniforms, not the winter trench coats. Now, rules-wise, it makes absolutely no difference. It's purely an aesthetic difference. But for a lot of people, it might not be the look that they're going for with their Soviet army. Overall, I give the Soviet starter army a very respectable 8.5 out of 10. It comes with everything you need to build a well-balanced Soviet force. But I've taken a few points off because it doesn't have the winter uniforms, you don't have the iconic Maxim gun in there, and you don't have enough infantry to do the full Soviet Tide. If I was to construct my perfect starter army, I would probably combine elements from all three of these starter sets. I would go for 80 winter infantry, I'd go for a medium mortar, and I would go for the full command, and I'd probably go for a T-34 variant as well. If it was possible to sneak the Maxim in there just for the iconic element, I'd go for that. If that was a starter set and it would cost even £116, I would give that a solid 10 out of 10. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What is your favorite starter set right now for any faction? And if you could build the perfect starter army, what units would you include? If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, August Vardy, and the Tommies. Thank you guys. Your incredible support makes a huge difference, and it is a big part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.